welcome to another episode of Let's Talk with Greg and
Thomas.
And we're finally in person. Yay.
Again.
It's okay. It's go away. That's probably gonna happen, so get used to it, y'all. We're in person again. Yay. Oh my gosh, I'm so happy that we're doing this. Finally. Like we had like a couple of in-person episodes and then Omicron happened, so yay. And also, sorry for my messy ass closet, because, yeah. Anyway, we're broke, y'all. We're on a budget. So yeah, anyway, so today we are going to be talking about the war in Ukraine in this episode. And we also want to apologize for the hiatus. A lot of stuff is happening in my life right now, and we just couldn't do it. But yeah, so we will be releasing 2 episodes this Monday. Woohoo! All right, but yeah, so we will be talking about Ukraine and basically, Thomas, do you want to introduce the story this week?
Yeah. So are we gonna do the first episode as the State of the Union? Yeah. Yeah. So basically, for everyone who had the unfortunate decision of watching this.
Yeah.
State of the Union.
Yeah.
We watched it, so if you haven't, then we can help break that down.
Yeah.
But there was a lot to unpack with this message, especially with what's going on in the world right now with Ukraine, with COVID still rampant.
Yeah. We're going to be breaking this all down in 2 parts. Yeah. So part 1, we're going to be focusing on the State of the Union.
Yeah. We're
going to go ahead and show a clip of highlights of it if you didn't watch it, which was a great idea. So let's go ahead and share that with y'all.
6 days ago, the crimes of the Russian oligarchs. We're joining with European allies to find that we're forever in debt for their sacrifices, and will carry on their mission to restore the trust and safety in every community deserves. Like some of you that have been around for a while, I've worked with you on these issues for a long time. I know what works: investigating crime prevention and community policing, cops who walk the beat, who know the neighborhood, and who can restore trust and safety. Let's not abandon our streets, but choose between safety and equal justice. We should all agree the answer is not to defund the police, it's to fund the police. Fund it. Fund it. Fund them with resources and training. Resources and training they need to protect our communities. I ask Democrats and Republicans alike, to pass my budget and keep our neighborhoods safe. And with all the bright spots in our economy, record job growth, higher wages, too many families are struggling to keep up with their bills. Inflation is robbing them of gains they thought otherwise they would be able to feel. I get it. That's why my top priority is getting prices under control. And so we have a choice. One way to fight inflation is to drive down wages and make Americans poorer. I think I have a better idea to fight inflation. Lower your costs, not your wages. Folks, that means make more cars and semiconductors in America, more infrastructure and innovation in America, more goods moving faster and cheaper in America, more jobs where you can earn a good living in America. Instead of relying on foreign supply chains, let's make it in America. Now is the hour, our moment of responsibility, our test of resolve and conscience, of history itself. It is in this moment that our character of this generation is formed. Our purpose is found. Our future is forged. Well, I know this nation. We'll meet the test, protect freedom and liberty, expand fairness and opportunity, and we will save democracy. As hard as those times have been, I'm more optimistic about America today than I've been my whole life, because I see the future that's within our grasp, because I know there's simply nothing beyond our capacity. We're the only nation on earth that has always turned every crisis we face into an opportunity. The only nation that can be defined by a single word, possibilities. So on this night, on our 245th year as a nation, I've come to report on the state of the nation, the State of the Union. And my report is this: the State of the Union is strong because you, the American people, are strong. We're stronger today. We're stronger today than we were a year ago. And we'll be stronger a year from now than we are today.
Hey, so let's go ahead and break that down, shall we? You know, before we start, if you were watching the State of the Union, and if you want to have fun with your friends, I suggest getting a bottle of vodka and taking a shot every time he stumbles. Because I counted at least 6. Like, we could have gotten fucked up right now. But what irked me was the defunding the police. Because he is acting like we weren't funding them. Like, for example, here in Pomona, the police department gets 60% of the city's budget, as most cities' police budgets do. So we've been funding them with military weapons, with toxic chemical weapons used on peaceful protesters, literal vehicles and weapons of war. Like, you know, it's so funny. I watch like cartoons, right, where like they show like a police person, right? And they're just like in some simple blue uniform or whatnot with like maybe a gun and a baton, and that's it. Yeah, right. They don't look like that anymore. Honey, they are being funded. They are basically freaking, you know, like, what's that called when like you're in like martial law, but like there's like officers, like war officers.
Oh, my head's gone too.
I know. They're basically stormtroopers. I'm gonna just call them that, for lack of a better term.
I mean,
sorry, y'all.
Let's say this on national perspective, right? United States police budget, if it was compared to every other nation's military, is the 3rd highest wage in the world. So on a graph, you've got United States of America's army, which is number 1. Then it's China's military, number 2, and then it's the police budget, number 3 of the United States. So the idea that the police are not funded well in the United States is laughable. And to even suggest the idea that the police had any defunding whatsoever is also laughable, and it's so misleading and
So
and I think,
misleading.
and it's not just the Biden administration that's been doing this. The media has also been ramping up the idea that theft and robberies are going up at a time where that's just simply not true. They're doing a lot of propaganda to try and heighten the idea that we need more police funding, which is just simply not true either.
You also, you mentioned the media, and basically the establishment has been also pushing this idea that the defunding the police slogan or whatever is harmful to the base, and it's not going to get the Democrats elected. Maybe not doing the defunding is going to not get you elected.
But polls, like polling, for example, has never been a good indicator of rightful policy, right? You look at the civil rights era and you look at the polling back then, Martin Luther King was hated as an individual.
Oh,
His
yeah.
ideas were hated. Everything about what he stood for was hated by
He
the
was
majority.
a socialist, y'all.
But we can all look back now and go, you know what? He was in the right because it was right. So the simple idea that polling, or this idea of just like, I don't know, just generic polling around, and how it's being framed, also how defund the police is being framed by the majority of outlets, is going to skew what is rightfully good policy. The problem is that people are trying to use this polling and this idea and trying to stigmatize defund the police to negate any sort of, as a politician, you need to be courageous and, you need to do what is right, even when the majority of people think it's wrong. And the problem is we're in a situation where A, they won't even touch the Courageous Act, and B, they're bought, unfortunately.
And not only that, like if you want to say, oh, well, it's because people are afraid of the verbiage of defunding the police, so we've got to get rid of that idea. Well, why don't you do what you're supposed to do as an elected official and educate your constituents on what that is, what that actually is.
And I think there's also an element, and I think this isn't really talked about enough, where the police are just doing what they want, which implies that it is a rogue institution. We see that in Portland with what's been happening there, how places in Portland were actually trying to implement certain rules and regulations that the police had to follow, and the police were just simply not doing it. Like simple things like body cams, where police were just not following direct rules by a governing elected body. And that tells you everything, that they are unaccountable. They're an institution that does not listen to supposed laws and regulations they have to follow themselves. It also shows that the law is very arbitrary, and that we are giving the police the power to choose when and where to enact these supposed laws. It's not working. And so the simple so to just say to just fund this institution more and hope that it corrects itself is not going to do anything. It's going to impact harm way more. But the problem is we have a liberal establishment, and also a lot of liberals, unfortunately, they fall into the category of, the police make me feel safe. And the problem is that police don't protect people. They don't keep.
No, they
safe.
show up after a crime.
They show up after the facts. Yeah.
I will also want to move over to where he mentioned about wages and costs. That irked me too, because why don't we do what you promised and raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour? And that is not even the goal, y'all. That is a very low compromise when we are now in an economy where $25 an hour is a livable wage. And even when FDR even created the minimum wage, he intended it for it to be a living wage. Minimum, meaning the bare minimum is for you to be able to live.
Yep.
But now we are on starvation wages. $7.25 is still the federal minimum wage. And I mean, granted, now in California it's 15.
But California, for California to be a living wage, you have to be eclipsing $30 an hour.
Yeah.
With the cost of rent, the cost of everything.
I make 17 an hour, and that's still not enough.
No.
My sister makes I want to say 23 an hour. That's still not enough. She lives in a freaking studio.
Yeah.
How about we raise? It's so sad that the movement for 15 an hour, the fight for 15, it started in 2012, 10 years ago, and now we're at to where, now it's 25.
I'd say it's more.
In most places,
Well, by the time we get 25, we'll be needing 35, or we need 40. And see, first of all, we need to really break down what is inflation. And the reality is, inflation is someone just putting the price up on something, right? And so it starts at the very bottom of the supply chain. Who is deciding to put the price up on these goods and why, right? And it's corporate greed, right? They don't say that, but it is. Inflation is corporate greed. And so you're seeing it with gas prices right now, for example. They're using the Ukrainian war as an excuse for gas prices skyrocketing, right? But who's deciding to put the prices up on gas? Shell, Chevron, BP, like all these big people. And see, when they buy gas and when they buy this stuff, they're buying it well in advance. So they've got the stock and the supply. They've got it for the next 12 months or even longer, right? But they put the price up immediately. They don't wait. They put the price up immediately, which means they're making bank right now. And
which, by the way,
and when I say bank, I mean hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars in profit. And so the reality is that it's just inflation is code it's code for corporate greed.
And by the way, we only get like 8% of our oil from Russia. So there you have it, folks. It's clearly corporate greed.
Yeah. And the problem is that in a functioning government, in response to a crisis in costs like this, like something like gas, that is an essential commodity, unfortunately, because we're still running off, the whole economy is run off fossil fuels still. In a wartime like scenario, goods like that would be taken under control of the government, right? It'd be taken under control, and
like it did in the 40s.
Like in the 40s during World War II, when this is what the UK did. They basically found that they had to initiate rationing as a response to the fact that
like you could only get meat on like Mondays or whatever
skyrocketing prices was causing devastation, right? And they had to take certain parts of the economy under control because the private sector was literally rinsing people, and that's the problem. The private sector is using, like it always does, it takes advantage of a crisis. We've seen this in the pandemic. We saw it at the very beginning where things like toilet roll were skyrocketing in price because
and rubbing alcohol
because they were taking advantage of a shortage, right? They owned what people needed, and that's the problem.
Yeah,
gas is the same thing. It's a commodity that everybody needs, and these big corporations are taking advantage of people. The problem is, if we had a functioning government, they would be addressing this directly and going after Chevron and going after the corporations for doing this, but they're not doing that because that's not that they don't represent people. They represent Chevron.
He said himself, it's been 245 years. You think they get the hang of it, but yeah. And it's so sad, going back to green energy, that speech was an hour and a half long. Not once did he ever mention climate change.
No. No, and he won't. And the problem is he won't, even though as progressives and as me being a socialist, I assume you as well, it's we knew Biden was lying from the get. I could see he was lying. And the problem is now, especially with this blatant gas price hike, any talk of green energy or climate initiatives is going to be pushed to the side. Because of this proxy war between Russia and the United States and Ukraine, and also because there is going to be a lot of anger, rightly so, from the American people around gas prices, and it's going to push us back. The problem is it does not help when you have a Secretary of Transportation like Pete Buttigieg and also Kamala Harris telling people that the alternative is to just go buy an electric car. You are so out of touch with people.
And not just them, but like literally liberal like celebrities like Bette Midler, which I really love, but unfortunately, like really disappointed me, where they would post a picture of like some girl in Ukraine and saying, "I will pay higher gas for you." It's because you fucking can.
But that's the problem, and this is where this is the problem with the liberal ideology, right? It's all about there's no societal context when it comes to organizing and helping others. It's about self-determination and basically if every singular person did the right thing, everything would be good. And it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. And the problem and the reality of this situation is that just telling people to go buy an electric car that costs $30,000. And by the way, if people use the excuse of saying, well, they can just go buy a second-hand electric car, just tell them that second-hand cars went up by 26%. Right? Inflationary standards, right? So even second-hand cars people can't afford right now.
No, so literally, you can't.
So this is the problem. And so now we're in a crisis because people who are already struggling just on a second or third or even fourth-hand car that they're just struggling along until it dies, and now they can't even afford the gas to put into the car, and you're already telling them, in a functioning government, they would, I don't know, Pete Buttigieg would roll out a plan to put large amounts of funding into a huge public transportation, rollout or something, something.
Yeah, exactly. If you fund more into public transportation, you do actually end up helping the climate crisis because you're not having individual cars, creating emissions, and public transportation should be free, period.
But, like I said, offering public transportation right now is the short-term solution because the reality is that unfortunately, America's infrastructure is geared around the automobile, right? Which already means that America, if something happens to, say, gas prices, where the whole infrastructure relies on the need to basically fuel your car through gas, you're already in a nightmare scenario because there's very little alternative for Americans to go to use alternative forms of transportation. And people say, sorry.
Oh, no, go.
People say, just go walk down. You can walk, can't you? You can take
an able person can.
Right, but what about if you live in, I don't know, Idaho or Iowa? I don't know, somewhere where the hospital's 30 miles down the road from you, right? And there's no bus in sight. There's literally no bus stop for the next 20 miles. What then? What do they do? And the problem is the liberal response would be just move out, move somewhere else. That's the response. And that's what they did in Texas when Texas had that ice cold issue with everything went on. And they just told them to move out the state. Great. So your solution is a refugee crisis to get out of areas and move into other areas. That is not the solution here. And I don't know. We need, in a functioning government, they would take this crisis and go, right, how can we best solve this in the short term and then propel us into a destination where we don't have to rely on gas.
Yeah.
We don't have to rely on these things.
And, you mentioned like places like Idaho or whatnot. It's not just places in Idaho. It's actually here.
Yeah.
There are some places where I cannot go on the bus.
Yep.
And, or in Chino, my friend Aisha lives in the hills. And the next bus is like a 3-mile walk.
Yep.
people like me can't do that.
No.
You know, so people are like, why don't you just walk? That's a very, you know, ableist thing to say.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but since we are going closer to, you know, talking about Ukraine, we will be seeing you in the next episode of part 2. So stay tuned. All right, bye.